There was a point during this investigation where I discovered something that was so disturbing, I actually considered not making this video. Petscop is a web series. It's also the name of a video game the series centers on. The series is like a kaleidoscope, each episode adding a fragment of a mirror that reflects back upon everything we thought we knew, creating seemingly endless patterns and looping realities that leave you so mesmerized you forget you were ever trying to figure out how it worked. Like the title, Petscop, it's strange, and when you first see it, you assume its meaning will be unveiled eventually. But after the waterfall of questions that is this series, you forget the first one you had. What does Petscop mean? I think I know what Petscop means, the title and the series. It's only with a few rewatches and a lot of focus can you begin to put together the true story hidden under the surface. I watched this series as it came out years ago. Since then, I've seen a few analysis videos attempting to piece together this bizarre, disturbing mystery. But none of them satisfied me. It always felt like there was more, and that the usual explanations were too complicated. After the success of my Five Nights at Freddy's theory, I decided to turn my attention back to another story I had unfinished business with. A series that's like a birthday party, where each gift is a little mystery. And I'm here to open them. Today, I lay out the answer to the question that is Petscop. The first video on the channel begins with Paul booting up a PlayStation game by a company called Carolina. The game is Petscop, a portmanteau on the words pet and scop. Scop, pronounced shop, is an Old English word for a poet. When pronounced correctly, you get the setting of the game. Pet shop. But why name it like this? It feels like we'd need another poetry connection to validate this theory. Maybe we'll find one later. Paul states that the video's purpose is to prove to someone, the intended viewer, that
I'm not lying about this game that I found.
The main gameplay takes place in what's called the gift plane, and Paul notes that the game is unfinished. The only finished level is called Even Care, and the objective involves completing puzzles to collect pets. Inside, Paul finds a sign that says, when choosing a pet, find somebody that you like. You don't have to love them right away. Paul begins catching pets and shows off the pets page in the pause menu where you can read their descriptions. After collecting several pets, Paul says,
Now I'm going to show you the part that's actually interesting.
He goes on to describe a note that he found with the disc. There are two sets of writing on the note. The top, in all caps, says, I walked downstairs, and when I got to the bottom, instead of proceeding, I turned to the right and became a shadow monster man. The bottom of the note reads, June 13, 97. For you, please go to my website on the sticker, and also go to Ronith's room, and press start, press down, 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 right, start. Paul does this, and the music stops, indicating something has happened. He leaves Even Care, and the real game begins. Episode 1 provides a taste of what Petscop does so well. You first think Paul is uploading for us, the audience. Videos uploaded to YouTube in this style, referred to as a Let's Play, are usually for everyone. Then you realize there is a specific, intended viewer, but we aren't told who. You believe the game is made for anyone with a PlayStation. After all, Carolina is a company, they want to make a profit, right? Then you hear about the note, indicating there's an intended player of the game. You might think this intended player is Paul, until you realize the other writing, the one in all caps, is likely a response from this intended player to the developer. The writer of this series is constantly challenging your assumptions while weaving this intricate character web, a web that we are going to untangle. Recounting every single event and detail in the series would take 3 hours, so we won't be doing that. That would also be confusing. This video will be broken into 3 parts. The first is going to establish all of the characters and prove their connections, culminating in a family tree, untangling that web we talked about, and even unmasking who eventually took the channel from Paul and censored parts of the game. Part 2 will dissect the game itself and how it works. Toward the end of the Petscop series, it's easy to lose your grip on what's happening. That's why the series sticks with you. It feels like you never truly got closure, because you get lost near the end. But there is real logic to what's happening. We just have to understand the mechanics of the game and the forces at play. Finally, Part 3 will connect everything we've covered and unravel the entire mystery. Before we begin, there's something I have to address. There's a real-world tragedy tied to this series. It's not uncommon knowledge that certain character names and themes in Petscop were drawn from a horrifying, real event. But I think that's as far as the connection goes. The creator of the series has since expressed his regret for this inspiration, and I do not think the details of that tragedy are necessary for solving this mystery. Therefore, I won't be bringing it up again. Petscop 2 opens with Paul finding a path deeper into this eerie world. He explains to his friend that he couldn't find this door before, and nothing he did prompted it to open. So what does this mean? It means that everything from this point on is being experienced by Paul for the first time. Our guide is going in blind, and we are right there with him. Paul documents what he finds in this weird game and continues to upload these videos for his friend. Paul eventually finds a child's room in the game, and something on the table has been censored for the viewers. He reacts strangely to whatever he sees.
I don't know, maybe that's just something that it puts in any room.
He later acknowledges that this game is obviously connected to him and the people in his life. He even refers to having found his room in the game.
But when I found my room, it made, I was shocked at first, but it made sense.
At the end of the series, Paul, who has stopped narrating the videos at this point, finds a machine and plays a song called Paul's Melody, which upsets this guy. In the final scene, Paul's brought to someone named Boss by this girl, and the series ends. Belle is a character who helped test this game when she was a child, and her puzzle-solving skills even had the developer choose her to help him test the machine. We get to see a recording of an early playthrough where the developer leaves a message telling her that he was considering letting her be someone named Tiara if the testing had gone well, but she gave up. As a result, there's now a character named Tiara that can be found in a room called Quitter's Room. Paul also finds a purple egg in a locker with a letter written from Tiara's mother, wishing her a good day at school. It's also implied in this recording that Belle went missing at some point in real life. Paul's friend, the person he's addressing while making his videos, is his original intended viewer. Toward the end of the series, Paul is on the phone with the person and refers to her as Belle.
Oh, you there?
Paul eventually teams up with Belle in-game, and she helps him complete his tasks. In one of Belle's playthroughs, the in-game timer claims her console had been running Petscop for 17 and a half years. Care is an NPC Paul discovers in the game. A conversation between Care's parents reveals Care is not growing eyebrows, a fact that pleases her father. There are 3 different collectible versions of her in-game: Care A, B, and NLM, or Nobody Loves Me. The versions represent the progressive deterioration of Care's mental and possibly even physical health. Paul catches one of these versions by playing the He Loves Me Not game. Care NLM's description says that to catch her, you had to lie, but it may not be a lie forever. This is a reference to the sign from before that says, you don't have to love the pets right away. With this puzzle, the developer is saying that Care was manipulated, tricked by someone who claimed to love her. This is likely in reference to an event where she was kidnapped by her father. He held her hostage in a school until she escaped and returned home to her mom on her birthday. When she returned, her face was damaged, but we aren't told how or why. This is why she covers her face. A scene with a counselor confirms Care's face was severely injured during the kidnapping. Paul knows the events and characters depicted in this game relate to the people in his family, which makes this girl's existence strange. he has no idea who she is. Paul puts Care into the machine at the end of the game and gets an Easter egg in return. Rainer is the developer of Petscop. In one of the earliest versions of Petscop that we get to see, a message appears calling it Daniel's Game. This, combined with the fact that the YouTube channel at one point referred to Rainer in quotes, tells us that Rainer is a pseudonym and Daniel is his real name. At one point in the series, we see a recording of Care playing Petscop, confirming Care is a real person. But it's what Rainer says to Care in this recording that's important. He tells her a little about her family tree, and we learn that he is Care's cousin. But why choose the name Rainer? Besides it being a connection to the rain cloud wavy that we'll get into later, Rainer is a reference to the poet Rainer Rilke. There's that poetry connection. Another piece of evidence in support of this connection is that Rilke happened to be a friend of Igor Stravinsky, a composer whose music Daniel has been learning, and one he references here. What began as a pet collecting game eventually changed course into something personal, something targeted. Rainer began redoing Petscop in '96 for someone named Marvin. It appears to hold clues regarding Marvin's crimes and other secrets. Rainer's known to create custom versions of Petscop for certain people and leaves messages for the different players of the game. Rainer tells Marvin that he found pictures, evidence of something that happened with Marvin and his friend at a windmill all the way back in '77. The series never explicitly states what this is, but I think there are enough clues here to put it together. Rainer's full name is Daniel Hammond, and we know this thanks to his brother. Michael Hammond's name is discovered on a tombstone in-game. Paul's only reaction?
That's a dead kid.
There are three strong pieces of evidence we can use to confirm Mike is in fact Rainer's brother. In a developer note on one of the pets, Rainer says that Mike called the pet a funny, stupid blob monster, and there's a save file titled Mike from an extremely early version of the game. Anyone playtesting a video game at this age hasn't been hired to do so. They must have some personal connection to the dev. The writer of this series gives us our final clue on the matter in the form of a birthday card from someone to Mike, where they tell him to thank his older brother. In Mike's playthrough, he finds an Easter egg and receives the message, "One of the eggs was in Daniel's game?" What an unfair trick. Mike obviously died young, but we also know he first went missing. We learn this in the description for Care A. Rainer's talking about how when a child is kidnapped, the trauma they suffer changes them forever.
My brother didn't want us to find him because he knew we'd all be looking for Michael A.
This is to say that if they ever found Michael again, he wouldn't be the same. Since we know Mike is Rainer's brother, we can confidently place him as Care's other cousin on the family tree. During that recording of Care playing Petscop, Rainer's message reveals some new family members. In it, we learn her aunt and uncle are Jill and Thomas. Paul knows Jill in real life.
I have to call Jill.
And mentions on the phone to Belle that Jill intimidates him.
I don't like talking to them. They intimidate me. I mean, Jill specifically. She hasn't called you.
We also discover through dialogue programmed into the game that Paul had a fight with Jill on his birthday in 2017.
I think that was based off of a conversation that I had last year on my birthday.
After he discovered she had thrown his Petscop disc away in the middle of his investigation. While not explicitly stated, Jill and Thomas are Daniel and Michael's parents. We know this because in his message to Care, the only family members Rainer mentions are Marvin, Anna, Jill, Thomas, and Daniel. He's reminding her of her family and his. So why doesn't he mention Michael? It's because Michael is already dead. Anna Mark is Care's mother. She was married to Marvin. In an early prototype of the game, there's a letter from Anna to Michael on his birthday. She tells him she got him the gift in a black box, a box she warns him not to shake. Just a brief note about this. This is most likely the dog that Raynor mentions earlier in the series. Raynor says that a dog was hit by a car, and he was the only one who wanted to put him down. He also claims that when dogs wag their tail and appear happy, it's not real. This is an interesting insight into the psychological profile of our developer that we will come back to later. In Anna's letter, she also asks Michael to thank his other auntie, if you see her. Not everyone can. Anna and Marvin separated at some point, as implied by a calendar in-game that shows Marvin's custody of Care represented by green dates. Anna asked Raynor to stay at her house and watch Care, as we can see written on this letter, pinned to the wall. We know this letter was for Raynor because he confirms in an in-game message to Marvin that he had been spending time at Anna's house since Anna and Marvin's separation, and he's the only character known to do this. Anna urgently asked Raynor to come by and paint over something. She also provided Raynor with a list of objects, a list that's never elaborated on. So why did Anna ask Raynor to watch Care for her? It's because Anna had to work. Early in the series, Paul finds an office with a ringing phone that when answered says,
Care left the room.
An office that we discover is labeled Anna's office in-game. This is the same line we hear when Paul visits the Mark house and witnesses Care's kidnapping. This scene represents the moment Anna found out her daughter had been taken. Paul also unlocks a scene that shows Raynor, who's always represented by white text, giving a gift to Anna, represented by blue text, on Christmas. A gift that triggers a cutscene taking us to the TV. Marvin Mark, Anna's husband and Care's father, is seen playing a version of Petscop created specifically for him. In it, Raynor asks him to use this small building as a landmark to find an unmarked grave that exists in real life. Raynor says that only Marvin will be able to find it. Now, we don't get to see whether or not Marvin finds the grave, but in the next version of the game, Marvin is shown several objects on pedestals. One references his hideout in a school. One is a picture he painted on a wall that Anna was eager to paint over. Thank you, Raynor. One is Care's head inside a cone, and the last is a red vase with a flower. While looking at the cone, Marvin reads about how Raynor was at Marvin's home and was suddenly overwhelmed with disgust while watching Marvin's daughter twirl about. The last item is a reference to an instance where Marvin used Care's warped reflection in a vase to convince her she was ugly. Marvin eventually meets up with Paul in-game, asks Paul which of these rooms he's in, and says,
Here I come.
Marvin presumably leaves his controller because he stops moving. Paul begs him. We don't see what happens in the real world, but Marvin returns to his controller and leaves. Paul must be hurt because he can only type a single word to Belle. Lena Leskowitz is the last and maybe the most mysterious character in the game. Lena was Anna's sister. Marvin, Anna, and Lena were hanging out near a windmill in 1977 when Lena went missing. Raynor found photos taken on this day and asks Marvin,
What did you do?
He's seemingly accusing Marvin of being responsible for Lena's disappearance. But Marvin claimed to have sat on a bench with a birthday cake after she disappeared, hoping to lure her back. Raynor doubts this story. During Care's playthrough, Raynor shows her a tombstone that claims Lena died in 77, likely as a result of the windmill incident. Okay, with that we have a solid character foundation to build from. We have Raynor's family, Care's family, Lena, Paul, and Belle. But there's one more connection we can make. One more way in which we can tie these characters together. We know Anna and Lena are sisters, and Anna and Marvin were married, which means Anna was originally a Leskowitz. But there's another Leskowitz we've been introduced to. Jill and Thomas are Care's aunt and uncle, which means one of them is blood relatives with Marvin or Anna. Remember Anna's letter to Michael, where she said, thank your other aunt if you see her, not everyone can. This is referencing Lena's grave that says they didn't see her. So Anna is telling Michael to thank Lena if he sees her. While we aren't sure exactly what this means yet, this directly connects Michael's family to the other Leskowitz sister. We also know this family's last name is Hammond, which traditionally would come from the father. Jill hasn't always been a Hammond, because Jill is the third Leskowitz sister. Now, before we dismantle this game's mechanics and shine a light on the secrets it holds, there's one more revelation about the people in its orbit that I think we're ready for. At some point, the ownership of the YouTube channel is handed from Paul over to someone that only refers to themselves as we. The video's descriptions eventually begin to contain messages from these mysterious individuals. There are 3 sentences in this description that completely unmask who is behind the later uploads. One of the lines says that the Petscop recordings were first given to us as a Christmas gift many years ago. The last 2 sentences are, Paul continued to record himself at our strong suggestion. Though he had issues with the arrangement, these have finally been settled. What does this mean? This is a reference to the censored items in-game. There are multiple times when Paul freaks out upon seeing something in Petscop. These items are then covered with a black square, hiding them from us, the viewers. Whoever got control of the channel and encouraged Paul to continue playing only convinced him to do so by promising to censor these items. So of these suspects, who is it? Many people online believe it to be Jill. After all, Paul claims to be intimidated by her.
They intimidate me. I mean, Jill specifically.
The problem with this is one of the only things we know about Jill directly contradicts the behavior of the censors. The censors want Paul to keep playing Petscop, and even go so far as to persuade him to do so. But Jill doesn't want Paul to continue, and upon her initial discovery of what he was doing, she took his disc and threw it away. Whose house are we in when we get the scene of someone receiving a gift on Christmas? A gift that plays a cutscene taking us to the TV, like we're starting a video game. Who has an association with the color black and is even shown in-game to hide evidence by covering it in black paint? The censors, and by extension, the new owners of the Petscop channel, are the Marks, Anna and Marvin. The Marks convince Paul to continue playing on the condition they censor certain items in-game. But they're clever. They find a way to honor Paul's wishes and reveal everything he asked them not to. Look at this letter from the censors and notice how what they've been told to censor is described. They include Paul's phrasing in quotes to get around revealing these items later. They were told to censor a present with a sticker on it. No one said anything about censoring a pedestal. So why do they want Paul to keep playing Petscop? If the game accuses Marvin of heinous crimes, why would they push anyone to play? To answer that, we have to understand the game. One of the multitudes of bizarre discoveries Paul makes in Petscop is something called the Child Library. This place is operated by inputting a child's facial features into an easel. You're then taken to that respective kid's room. Paul tries random features at first and is presented with random rooms. But then he remembers the faces on Mike's grave and the shed he found Karen. He tries Mike's face first.
Mike's not inside right now. He's dead.
In Mike's room, instead of toys, we find a strange shape and a pair of tweezers. He tries Kare's face next, and inside her room is a box of crayons, another one of those strange shapes, and a letter on the wall that contains the conversation I mentioned earlier about Kare's mom discovering Kare not growing eyebrows. Paul then gets an idea. He tries Kare's face, but with Mike's eyebrows, and finds the room that the new channel owners censored. This is the room Paul is referencing when he says, "I found my room," because it's the only room that clearly disturbs him. Paul eventually finds a windmill in-game. Inside, he finds a new face, Lena's face. He returns to the child library, enters her face, and is brought to her room. There we see another version of the player character move out the back. Paul doesn't react to this. And later, when he leaves, his movements are exactly the same. This is our first taste of some of the more confounding elements of this story. But I promise you, we're gonna make sense of it. A letter in Lena's room tells the story of Rainer finding photos of Marvin, Anna, and Lena at a windmill in '77, the event that led to Lena's disappearance. He states that he went looking for the windmill, but it's gone now, and appears to blame this on Marvin. The weird part of this letter is that Rainer claims years later, after Marvin and Anna marry, Lena was reborn as their daughter. He goes on to say that Anna won't admit this to be true, but that Rainer has the evidence. Rainer and Paul both mention that the child library contains faces from the family, and since Paul's face is included, that means Paul is part of this family somehow. So, what is this place? There are two major implications this library has on the story. There's the practical function this mechanic has for gameplay, and the poetic meaning of the way it's presented. The practical function of this game mechanic is to hide lore connected to certain people in rooms the player has to find or unlock. But what's more interesting is the meaning. What do Care, Mike, and Lena have in common? All three of them went missing in real life. We also know that Rainer believes Marvin was responsible for Care's and Lena's disappearances, and that this game, which includes the child library, was intended to be experienced by Marvin. The child library is more than a mechanic to drip feed lore. It's a victim list. These are all kids Marvin took. Rainer is accusing Marvin of treating the family like some sort of child library he can take kids from as he pleases. With this game, Rainer's condemning Marvin for the depravity of what he's done. He's saying,
I can't believe you would do this to people, even kids, even your own child. Even Care.
Paul finds this strange shape in a room surrounded by what looked to be a child's drawings of the same shape we saw in the child library. He's able to type a question here and get a response, but only certain questions yield results. Questions that aren't programmed in are answered with the default, I don't know. Paul asks the strange object about multiple characters from the game, to no success. However, when he asks who is Tiara, he gets the answer, Petscop Kid. Very smart. He also asks who am I and gets the response, Newmaker. Suddenly, the object turns purple. Then, Paul gets the message, turn off PlayStation. When he asks why, the object responds, Marvin picks up tool. Hurts me when PlayStation on. The object suddenly changes back to its original color. And what does it call itself when Paul asks, who are you? Tool. Paul is back in the quitter's room turning pages of something in real life. What he's turning are his discovery pages, his notes about Petscop. But he stops when music starts to play. He notices the Tiara character's gone, but once the music stops, she reappears. The note on the wall now has a message, come here. Paul returns to the tool, and it says, I love you, Newmaker. Please show Marvin where his house is. Paul asks, who are you? Go there and he'll follow you. His daughter is there. Paul types, remember being born? The same thing that was on the note. Also wants 1,000 pieces for machine beyond school basement stairway. This whole conversation implies that the quitter character, Tiara, is the one communicating through the purple tool. This is not a ghost, a real person, or even an AI. It's dialogue, programmed in by the developer. We know this for two reasons. Paul is playing a PlayStation 1 game at home. It's not online, which means it's not a living person. Paul also remarks that it doesn't respond to his questions, which is how you would know if it was a ghost or an AI. This dialogue is here to show the audience that the tool, this strange shape, is based on a child's drawing of something that a man named Marvin hurt them with, and that this game contains an accusation of something horrible. But at least now, we have our objectives. The original method used to bring us these videos was Paul screen recording his gameplay to upload to YouTube for Bell. But in a later video, Paul says this.
Forgot to start the recording. They won't like that.
The people he's referring to are the censors, who we established are Marvin and Anna. But more importantly, If he's not recording, how are we seeing this? In one of the channel descriptions, the censors write, "The purpose of this YouTube channel is to preserve and display the recordings within the video game Petscop." We also witnessed recordings that appear to be from other players long before Paul. The truth is, the game has a secret function, only accessible to those who know where to look, and is recording the movements of everyone who plays. You can watch specific recordings or select Room Impulse. Room Impulse allows you to change the in-game time and see what every player was doing in the chosen room at that time. We see Paul do this before selecting to view a specific player, the only one that's moving backwards. So why would Raynor implement this secret functionality? Remember that question, because the answer will be the key to everything. Another critical piece needed to interpret the strange events of Petscop is knowledge of what the game calls generations. These are simply updated versions of the game. For instance, in a recording called Marvin, we see him playing in Generation 6. He enters the cheat code, finds the secret level, and just wanders aimlessly. The video then cuts to Generation 7, where Raynor has added instructions to use the brick building as a landmark to help Marvin with his task. Once Marvin finishes his playthrough of Gen 7, he's given Gen 8, where things get really interesting and where most people become too confused to continue to follow the series, is when recordings and generations are used in combination with each other. See, in the recording menu, you can actually play back someone's movements inside a generation or version of the game that they weren't originally playing in. There's an early example of this that will explain what I'm talking about. Paul comes across a character sprite with a different green head. He understands this to represent Marvin in-game, because the same silhouette said, "Where's my house?" and Tiara said, "Show Marvin where his house is." But I know what you're thinking. Wait, didn't we just see Marvin and his character looks like Paul's? Correct, that's because this is the player sprite. When you're playing, this is what you look like. Paul plays a newer generation of Petscop, a generation where Raynor uses this sprite to represent Marvin to whoever the current player is. The Marvin character runs into this wall for a while before turning up and disappearing. We then hear Paul on the phone with Belle saying,
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's not here now. There's not even a passageway or anything.
What does all of this mean? The game is playing back a recording of Marvin's movements that were recorded in Generation 8, where there was a hallway right here. And Belle confirms this because she's seen it in her playthroughs. This is why the series is so confusing. We're sometimes watching someone play now, sometimes watching someone's playthrough from the past, sometimes watching someone play now with an NPC, sometimes watching someone play now with a recording of a real player from the past, sometimes watching someone play now with another player. Oh yeah, we're gonna get to that. Sometimes watching someone's movements being replayed in another generation, and sometimes even watching multiple of the options edited together into a single video. But there's always a clue to exactly what's going on. You just have to pay attention. There's another pretty obvious conclusion we can draw from our previous discoveries. At one point, Paul unlocks a conversation in-game that's based on a conversation he had in real life with Jill the year prior, when they fought after he discovered she threw his Petscop disc away. Paul's question in response to this is, how does this 90s PlayStation game have a conversation of mine from 2017? My question is, how is Paul still playing Petscop if Jill did something with his disc? Now, you may jump to the conclusion, well, obviously she gave it back, but I think the answer to Paul's question answers our question, perfectly lines up with our previous theories, and maintains the character motivations we've laid out thus far. Upon discovering his conversation with Jill in-game, Paul Googles if you can rewrite to a CDR. The internet's answer is that you obviously can't. The fact that Paul's conversation with Jill is in the game, the fact that new generations are made in response to playthroughs of old ones, and that Paul is able to continue playing Petscop despite Jill throwing it away, all suggest more than one Petscop disc. Paul has somehow gotten his hands on another one, a disc that was burned much more recently than he expected. Near the end of the timeline, Paul plays back his movements when he explored the bathroom of this house. He does so in a generation where there's a ramp to a cube above the bathtub, and his old movements allow him to reach the cube. He knows this cube exists because when he originally entered the bathroom, he saw it for a single frame.
I could have sworn I just saw above the bathtub those white blocks with the symbols on them.
This is what unlocks the school level. He doesn't narrate any of this footage because it all takes place near the end of our timeline, and the recording likely came from the disc and not from Paul using screen capture. Here he meets up with Marvin and is shown how to use the chat feature. The chat feature works by entering codes into the controller that correspond to a phonetic alphabet. The word you type is then checked to see if it exists in the table of usable words, and if it does, it's presented on screen. This is why Marvin calls him Paul and not Paul. The word Paul exists in the table, but the name Paul does not. Marvin uses the word Paul because it's the closest thing to Paul's actual name. If you type something that's not in the table, you get the error not in table. However, this whole scene has an insane implication. Paul and Marvin aren't playing on the same PlayStation because they wouldn't need this feature. They could just speak to each other in the same room. So how are they playing together? In Petscop, Paul finds the Carolina offices, a cone shape that makes boss noises, whatever that is, and a bunch of numbered rooms. These are the ghost rooms, or testing rooms. Toward the end of the timeline, Belle and Paul are playing Petscop in these rooms in real life. We know this because Marvin asks Paul which room he's in, and Paul points to one. We also know Paul would have needed to find a new disc somehow, and Belle tested a multiplayer function for the game years ago. She's been here. Seeing as how the game included a chat feature for players on separate consoles, it's clear Rainer had intended there to be some kind of networked multiplayer function at some point. But if it's a PlayStation 1 game, how is this possible? The PS1 didn't have any network capabilities. But you know what did come out in the late 90s? What was sent to developers while Rainer would have still been working on Petscop? Something that had networking capabilities and a giant familiar word embedded on the side? The PlayStation 2 Developer Kit. This is what Paul and Belle are using in the testing rooms. And finally, we've come to the most exciting part. The truth about Petscop. Throughout my investigation, I kept coming across this recurring theme of Lena and/or Care spinning. Care is twirling about at her house when Rainer looks at her and becomes disgusted. Lena's character sprite is seen spinning in the windmill, and one of the censored objects, an object we get to see uncensored in Marvin's playthrough, is a spinning triangle or cone with Care's face in it. If this game is for Marvin, what is he supposed to take away from this? Why is Care's head been put in a cone for Marvin to see? What is Rainer trying to say? Rainer is telling Marvin that he knows what happened at the windmill. This isn't Care. It's Lena. In 1977, Marvin Mark, Anna Leskowitz, and Lena Leskowitz were playing in a windmill they found. Anna was taking photos. It was all innocent. But Lena fell. She fell into the hopper, a cone-shaped funnel attached to a windmill that's used to feed material into the mill for processing. She was last seen spinning in the machinery as Marvin and Anna fled. Marvin tried to find the windmill again, but he couldn't for a long time. Eventually, he was able to find it, evidenced by the fact that the tool can provide the real-world coordinates.
I went up and I typed, "Where is the windmill?" and that didn't work. And so I tried, "Where was the windmill?" and that's how I got the text.
Coordinates that Paul and Belle look up online to find satellite images of what appears to be a rock or mound in its place.
It looks like a stone.
Because Marvin burned it down. It's important to note that while these coordinates have been censored, they weren't included in Paul's list of things to censor. That's because Anna and Marvin don't want anyone to find it. In Care's playthrough, Raynor shows her Lena's grave. Her death date is listed as 77, implying she died in that windmill. But in Anna's birthday card to Michael, who was born in 88, she tells him to say hello to his other aunt if he sees her. I think Raynor is being an unreliable narrator in this instance. He's painting Marvin as a murderer to his daughter. Why do I think this? In addition to the birthday card discrepancy, there are two additional pieces of evidence that lead me to believe Lena is still alive. At the very end of Marvin's playthrough of Generation 8, he sees the picture of the windmill for the first time. This is likely the first generation of the game that included it. Marvin immediately runs to the tool and asks, "Did you find Lena?" But that could just be him asking if Raynor found Lena's dead body. After all, Raynor has mentioned digging throughout the series. That's true. Raynor did dig someone up, but it wasn't Lena. And Marvin's second question confirms this. Who is your boss? See, Marvin has just put together what we never thought to ask. Who founded Garalina? There's a tall cone-like object inside the Garalina offices in-game that, when approached, makes boss noises. At the end of the game, a similar object is sitting on a park bench, and Tiara tells us that's boss. Only, if we take a look at the inputs Belle is typing here, we can use previous inputs throughout the series to see that she's typing a different word, one that is being auto-corrected to boss. Tiara is saying, that's Lena. In this game, Raynor is covering for Lena's adult life, free of her psycho sister and evil husband. Thanks to this revelation, we can finally place Belle on the family tree. Raynor has already given the Tiara character the last name Leskowitz, and when Paul says her face wouldn't be in the child library because she's not part of the family,
Because you aren't family, so you wouldn't have a room.
Belle becomes offended. That's because Belle is Lena's adopted daughter. Raynor began developing Petscop specifically for Marvin in 96, but Care didn't go missing until 97, and Marvin didn't actually kill Lena as evidenced by the birthday card. So why did Raynor start Petscop? Marvin, having just found out the Hammond family is in touch with Lena after all these years, a girl he's so fixated on, obsessed with, that he's literally raising his daughter to be some kind of replacement for her, does what any obsessive psychopath would do. He kidnaps the most vulnerable Hammond. We know Michael went missing. We also know Michael dies, following through with the motivations of the characters we've established thus far. We arrive at a terrible truth in an effort to get information on Lena out of Michael. Marvin tortured him to death. Michael was hidden, buried in an unmarked grave, and Raynor suspected Marvin's guilt, but couldn't prove it. So he came up with a plan. He took the game he'd been working on at Lena's company and repurposed it to trick Marvin. He put a model of a familiar building in the game and programmed the game to record a player's movements. He then gave the game to Marvin and implied that Mike's dead body was in the game and that Marvin should find it. He was lying, but recorded and retraced Marvin's steps in real life to find his brother. It worked, and Daniel found Mike's body. This is confirmed in the following generation, where Raynor has added the Michael grave that, once inspected by Marvin, will not leave his screen.
You did this.
The purpose of the theme of the game, Pet Shop, Pets, is important because Raynor has realized that Marvin sees people the way that Raynor sees pets. Michael was given a gift, a dog, on his birthday. Raynor thinks of dogs as lesser life forms, disposable. That's why as soon as the dog is hurt, Raynor wants to put him down. This is how Marvin sees kids. Raynor sees in Marvin a darker reflection of his own psychology. But Mike wasn't a pet.
Mike was a gift.
Anna tries to distance herself from Marvin, She divorces him and has Raynor come over to paint over Marvin's psychotic plans he's drawn on the walls and dispose of anything that could be used against her in court. Raynor doesn't blame her, so he agrees to help, but he finds something. Pictures from the windmill day, and for the first time, he sees what Lena looked like as a child. As he turns and spots Care in the house, Raynor's struck with just how far this obsession has gone. Care is being molded into Lena. Marvin isn't done. He has plans. He kidnaps Care and holds her hostage. The tweezers he had stolen from Mike's room were enough to remove Care's eyebrows, but more needed to be done. He could still see Care and not his Lena, so he took more drastic measures. He convinced Care she was ugly and that she needed to be fixed. He performed some kind of amateur operation on her face to try and make her look more like the object of Marvin's obsession. Care would later be asked to draw what it was that Marvin used on her. The purpose of this is just to show that a child had to draw something that an adult used on them. That's enough to understand what's happening in the story, but it wasn't enough for me, so I did my own digging. I wanted to know what the tool was. I figured Marvin's aim was to reshape or change Care's face, and that this was the tool he used to do it. So I looked up plastic surgery tools, started scrolling, and it wasn't long before a familiar shape caught my eye. The tool is a Jansen mastoid retractor. When implemented correctly, it's most often used to hold open a vertical incision in the neck. Now, I'm not going to show a real image of what this tool can do to a person, but just know it might look something like this. Against all odds, Care escapes. But something strange happens. No one is able to figure out where she was for one day before she returned home to Anna. Anna remarks that Care can't see and is bumping into things, which also raises the question, how did she find her way home? Her sight returns and she's reintegrated into school, but she appears to be out of it or changed. She's called multiple times by the counselor, but doesn't answer. Raynor once again uses Petscop to try to obtain real-world information through recording someone's movements. He asks Care to retrace her steps after escaping Marvin. The intention, of course, is to then retrace her movements in real life. At some point, Raynor gets a new idea. He begins working on a multiplayer function for the game. He consults his list of kids he's had playtest various versions and picks the smartest one, Belle. Inside the Garalina testing rooms, Belle, still a child, tests the machine that involves multiple players and a piano-like instrument called the Needles piano. We know this is a real instrument and not coded inputs from a standard PS1 controller because we see a picture of it during a loading screen. It's on the map of the testing room, and Paul is never taught how to input music notes via his PS1 controller, unlike when he had to learn how to use the controller to chat. He's simply told to play the Needles piano now and begins doing so. Raynor's offer to Belle is that if she helps him, he will make her a character named Tiara in-game. We know he uses people's real voices for characters sometimes, only she becomes bored and gives up because he has to play a whole song and keeps messing it up. Angry with the kid, Raynor sticks the Tiara character inside a room called Quitter's Room. Belle must be kidnapped by Marvin at some point, probably wanting information on what Raynor's up to, but she easily escapes. The families have been torn apart. The Hammonds lost a son. Raynor lost a brother. Lena doesn't associate with the Marks. And Anna's divorced her evil husband. Raynor was unable to finish his final vision for Petscop. He gives a Petscop disc with all of the recordings to Anna. 17 years later, Paul finds a Petscop disc. He begins playing it, making recordings to prove its existence to Belle, and speaking to her about it on the phone. She remembers bits and pieces about this game from her childhood, but doesn't know exactly what it was for. Together, they begin investigating this strange game. Petscop, re-emerging, brings back conflicting feelings for everyone connected to it. Jill knows the dangers of this game and throws it away when she finds Paul's disc. Belle shows Paul the testing rooms. she found them again, still running 17 years later. Anna and Marvin have their own secret motive for persuading Paul to continue to play. Whatever mystery this game has left, Paul is at the center of it. We've waited long enough. We have to address the elephant in the room. What is Paul's role in all of this? If his face is in the child library, how is he part of the family? Why does he know certain family members but not Care? Why did Care stop responding to her name after being kidnapped? Why does Care's face with eyebrows unlock Paul's room? Why do Anna and Marvin want Paul to play Petscop? How are they even connected to him? It's because they're Paul's parents. It's because Paul is Care. Daniel began calling himself Rainer after Rainer Rilke, who was born a male and raised as a girl to be a replacement for a girl his parents had lost. Daniel discovered that Anna and Marvin, overwhelmed with guilt over what they felt they did to Lena, began raising their son as Lena Reborn.
I do agree there's a resemblance. Very strong resemblance.
He's calling himself Rainer as a taunt to the Marks over the abuse he knows they're committing. Abuse that disgusts him. Paul was rescued on the road that day after fleeing his father by none other than Lena and Belle. They told him the truth. That was the day Care finally died and Paul was born. What do we see right before we hear the counselor tell Care, "I was calling your name, didn't you hear me?" We see the player being repeatedly drugged back to a sign that reads girl, and only by entering through this sign, by answering this call, do we unlock this conversation. This is the counselor calling Paul Care, but him not responding to the lie about who he is anymore. Rainer even refers to the facts about Care's family and identity as a curse. Paul moves on and forgets about the horrors of his childhood until 2017, until he finds Anna's copy of Petscop given to her by Rainer, and he begins reopening the wound that was almost healed. Jill knows some boxes are best left unopened, but Marvin and Anna reunite over this development. This is their chance to have their daughter back. Maybe through Petscop, Care will remember who she is. They force Paul to keep playing until Jill throws his disc away. Belle brings Paul to the testing rooms she was brought to as a child, where they can continue investigating, and where Marvin finally joins them. He instructs Paul to play music for Baby, and she will become Melody. Paul plays a song called Care's Melody, which pleases Marvin. This is training for the final level, the machine at the end of the game. Rainer's final goal for Petscop was to include a musical therapy level for kids who have experienced trauma. Marvin wants Paul to play Care's melody for the Care sprite. This would symbolize Paul accepting his identity as Care. But this is Paul's story, and he chooses his own path, that of truth. He plays Paul's melody, and Marvin finally quits. Paul receives an egg that's red and yellow, the two colors that represent Care and Paul in-game. The description reads, "You should start thinking about that." This is a reference to a pet description all the way back in Petscop 1 that said, "Where is the safest place you can put her?" Paul's answer? He places his egg with the tiara or bell egg, symbolizing his new life and family. Paul is leaving his abusive family to live with Belle and Lena. Rainer always knew what began with an Easter egg hunt would end with one. Petscop ends the way we were told it would from the very beginning. Paul goes from the garage to Lena. After all, she's been waiting for him. Now, of course, there are loose ends in Petscop that can't be neatly tied up, but I actually think that's intentional. In Anna's letter to Mike, which comes at the very end of the series, she talks about how birthday parties are cathartic because they answer all of the mysteries. This is the writer of the series winking at us. He's letting us know that not every box gets to be opened. But if you won't take it from me, maybe you'll hear it from this guy. Petscop isn't scary because of a ghost or some hyper-intelligent AI from the 90s. Petscop is scary because Petscop is possible. Kids aren't meant to be molded into whatever we want. Kids are meant to be kids. They're meant to be protected. And part of protecting them is telling them the truth. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.